Hi everyone, it's Monica and today I'm going to be filming my January wrap-up. I read 9 books this month, which was amazing, although 2 of them were novellas, but whatever, it still counts. I'm going to go from my least favorite to my favorite of the month, so on the bottom of the list is The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon by Stephen King. In this book we are following this 9-year-old girl and she gets lost in the Appalachian Trail. I think that's how you pronounce it. She went into this trail with her mother and her brother, but they are always arguing with each other, so they basically forget that she is there. And she goes to a side road to pee, and when she tries to get back, she gets lost. I had a lot of problems with this book. First of all, I didn't really understand the point of it. The whole time I was waiting to be shocked by something, or I was thinking that the ending was going to be super explosive and something big was going to happen. But no. Another thing that really bugged me is that we are following a 9-year-old girl, right? And for a 9-year-old, she's very clever about a lot of things. The choices she makes in here, some of them are so smart and I'm so proud of her. But then I turn the page and the next thing she does is so dumb, even for a 9-year-old. So I don't even know if I think this girl is smart or dumb. Overall, I think she's pretty smart, but she made some terrible decisions in this book. So I am so confused with how I feel about her, and that's probably why I didn't connect to the character at all. So I didn't really care about what was happening to her, which is kind of sad. Another thing that I really didn't like was the fact that at the beginning, in the first chapter or 2, we get to know a little bit of her life, about her family life, what happened with her parents, and why he's her brother always arguing with her mother. And the thing is, if that's important, then those characters have to be more present in the story. I get that this is the story of this girl, but there's actually a chapter in which her family appears and we get to know how they are feeling at that time, knowing that she's lost, knowing that they can never find her maybe. So if her family is only going to appear once, then why is that scene even there? It doesn't make much sense. Another thing that I really didn't like is that this girl loves Tom Gordon, right? But who the hell is Tom Gordon? So Tom Gordon is a Red Sox player and she has a tape in her bag so she can listen to the radio, and that's the thing that's holding herself together, basically, is that she can play the radio from time to time and listen to the Red Sox playing. The thing is, the baseball parts take you out of the story, so just because of that, it doesn't make sense. But here in Europe, we don't play baseball, so I don't understand how that works at all. So for me, it was even worse. Also, at one point in this book, this girl listens to the radio and they're talking about her. They're talking about a missing girl that's lost in the woods. They're talking about her. And instead of trying to listen to the radio when they're talking about her and trying to catch that, to see like where are they searching for her, near the water, up in a hill, where are they? No, she just wants to listen to baseball. That doesn't make much sense for a girl that is actually making good decisions. So I really didn't like that. So yeah, my main problem is that I didn't really understand the point of it. The only time that I actually felt something reading this book was in the very last sentence. So that's not a good sign. So I ended up giving this book a 2.5 out of 5 stars. Next up I have A Study in Scarlet by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This is the first book in the Sherlock Holmes series, so in here we get to know how Sherlock Holmes and Watson get to know each other, which was really cool. I didn't know that Sherlock Holmes was basically a chemist, which is nice because I'm a chemist, so that's cool. Actually, I liked the beginning of it. I liked how they got to know each other and learning about that. I really loved the second part of this book, but everything else I really didn't like. Basically, the mystery in here is that a body is found in a house that was supposed to be empty. The body is completely unharmed, but there's a word rage written in blood besides the body. The thing that bothered me about this the most is that a single phone call would have solved this mystery. And even though Sherlock Holmes did pay a lot of attention to small details, the road outside the house and everything in the walls and stuff like that, he solved all of this mystery with a phone call that the police should have made, like, first thing. So it doesn't make sense at all. Basically, part 1 finishes with him saying, "I know who did it." And then part 2 starts, and I thought that in part 2 we were going to understand why he got to that conclusion better. But in part 2 we are actually following the life of the murderer, which was amazing. This person is not an ordinary person, has not lived an ordinary life, and the motives behind the murder and stuff like that, it was amazing. I really liked it, but the detective part of it I really didn't like because it was just so easy. I'm very curious about reading more of Sherlock Holmes because maybe it was just my first experience with it, and I'm even more curious about reading other stuff by Arthur Conan Doyle. I have The Lost World by him, and I'm very curious because the part that was not about Sherlock Holmes I actually liked. Another thing that I really don't know is, are you supposed to like Sherlock Holmes? I know he's quirky, I know he's very arrogant and stuff like that, but are you supposed to like him despite all of those things? Because I really didn't like him. I preferred Watson, but even Watson, he was fine, but I didn't love him. So I really don't know how am I supposed to feel about these characters, but so far I don't feel much. So I ended up giving this book 3 out of 5 stars. Next up I have Heidi by Johanna Spyri. This book follows the life of Heidi, of course. She is an orphan girl, and when she was 5, I think, she goes to live with her grandfather up in the mountains in Switzerland. I don't really know if I'm supposed to tell you what happens next, but I think it's not a spoiler. I think everybody knows about that. But a year or so later, I really don't remember that, but maybe a year or so later, her aunt, which was the one that originally put her to live in the mountains with her grandfather, goes to pick Heidi up to live in the capital, I think, in a very fancy house. Basically, Heidi is there to make company to a very sick child that lives in that house. And basically, Heidi is just company for that girl. The thing is, Heidi loves the mountains, Heidi loves her grandfather. So as much as she's liking the experience, as much as she likes everyone around her, that's not home. And that's basically the story of this book. I really like this book, especially because of the concept of home. Even though you can have all of the comforts in the world, you can have a luxury, you can have everything you wanted, home is home. And I am a person that's connected to home in such a high level. If I'm away from not only the place and the house, but if I'm away from my things, my environment, I get so crazy in about 2 days time. So I really understand her, and that's why this book was so good to me. My thing with this book is that it is way too cute. I get that it's a children's book, but the stakes are not high at all. I never felt like this might not end well. I spent the whole book knowing exactly how this was going to go, and I don't really like that experience because it just gets very boring at some point because you already know what's going to happen, you're just waiting. That's why this book was a 4 out of 5 stars and not a 5, because it was just too fluffy. I needed a little more substance to it for it to feel more real. Overall, I really recommend. If you love classics, if you love children's classics, this is a must read. It's super cute, it's super easy, you fly through it, so yeah, I really liked it. Then I read Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, the first book in the Shadow and Bone trilogy, I think. In this book, we follow Alina Starkov, and in the first chapter, she is an orphan girl living in an orphanage, and basically one day, 3 Grisha people, come to the orphanage to test her and her best friend Mal, and probably all of the other children in the orphanage, to see if they are Grisha. I think that's pretty much it. And one thing that I really liked about this book is that you really don't understand the world when you're first reading it. Everything in this world is explained as you get to read the book. So that's one thing that I really like. There's no info dump in here, there's no telling and not showing. No, you are learning about this world as you read the book. It was hard for me to explain to you what happened in the first chapter because I was very confused whilst I was reading it. But after that, we follow the life of Alina when she's older. I don't know how old she is, but she's older. And she's basically part of an army that's trying to cross some kind of river, which is not really a river. And when they tried to cross, something happens, and we discover that maybe the 3 people that went there when she was a kid to the orphanage were wrong. And that's the story of this book, basically. When I finished this book, I felt like I still needed answers. I still didn't understand the world, so I picked the second one up. And I feel like after reading that one, I understand the world even more. Basically, with every book, you get more engrossed in it, you understand it better, you want to know more. So that's one thing that I think Leigh Bardugo really did well with this story. I first picked it up because I really wanted to read Six of Crows, and that's why I got into this series. I was not interested in this series, I was only interested in Six of Crows. But I get that some people say that you don't have to read these books to understand the magic in Six of Crows, but if I was confused in here, and you are explained how things work in here, in my opinion, and I still haven't read Six of Crows, but I really do think you don't waste anything reading this, because it's really good and you get to know the world, so I recommend reading it. I wasn't really thinking that I was going to like it, because like the reviews are not that great and everybody keeps raving about Six of Crows, but I actually really liked it and they ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I read 2 novellas in this world, and one of them is The Tailor. In this one, we are following Genya, which was, I think, my favorite character in the first book, so I was very excited when I first realized the story was about Genya. I think it's a very important story, and I think you need to read this story to understand better what happens at the end of Shadow and Bone. So, in my edition, this novella is at the end of the book, so you don't have to buy it or anything, it's there for you to read. So I really recommend reading it at the end of Shadow and Bone. It's very important for the story in my opinion, and I give it 4 out of 5 stars. The other novella is called The Demon in the Woods, and in here we are following the Darkling as a child. This was super interesting, actually. I don't think it's as important to the story as The Tailor was, but I do think it's important to get to know a little bit more of this person, the Darkling. But yeah, I don't want to tell you more about this story, it's just a little bit of the Darkling's life when he was a child, and it was a 4 out of 5 stars. Next up I have The Tales of Beedle the Bard by J.K. Rowling, illustrated by Chris Riddle. Chris Riddle. Maybe. I was very pleasantly surprised with this book, actually. I loved all of the stories, they were all so cute and entertaining and meaningful, so I really liked each and every one of them. I had my favorites, of course, but I really liked the stories and I was very impressed with them. And now, like, these are stories from the Harry Potter world, of course. But there's also a book of short stories about Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. There's also a book of short stories about the Shadow and Bone trilogy, and now I want to read them all because I love those worlds as well, and if they're as good as this one, I just really want to read them. And the thing that I liked the most about this book was the illustrations. Oh my god, they're amazing. When I first picked it up, I wasn't crazy about the editions because this cover is very yellow, and yellow is definitely not one of my favorite colors, so I wasn't too drawn to this book. But oh dear lord, wow. A friend of mine actually pointed out to me that Chris Riddle is the illustrator that works the most with Neil Gaiman, so now I want to read even more Neil Gaiman books because I'm just so excited to keep experiencing Chris Riddle's illustrations. They're amazing. Oh, and I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. Next I read The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis, the second book in the Chronicles of Narnia series. But I'm gonna put this down because it's just way too heavy for my little arms. In this book we are following Peter, Susan, Edmund and Lucy as they go into this very big house and they discover a wardrobe that goes into Narnia. I think everyone knows the story of this book. I grew up watching the movie, so I know the story by heart, and the movie is super truthful to the book, so it's exactly the same thing as the movie. There's some changes, especially at the beginning, but not much, so it's basically the same thing. That's why, so far, my favorite is still the first one, The Magician's Nephew, because I had no idea what that was about and I loved it so much. And this one, I loved it as well, of course, but I already knew the story, so it was a little less entertaining to read. Although it's still a 5 out of 5 stars. Of course, it's Narnia. I love this world so much. So yes, definitely recommend the book as well. And lastly, my favorite book of the month was Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows by J.K. Rowling. This was a reread. I read the series in Portuguese 3 or 4 years ago at this point, and I finally finished my reread of the series, this time in English. I can tell you about the differences I felt reading it in Portuguese and reading it in English. At least in the editions that I read, the translation is very good, so I really like that. The thing for me that is more important by reading these books in English is Ron. Ron's character is so much better in English. The expressions that he uses are just so British, there's no way to translate those. So that was very fun. But apart from that, I enjoyed reading in English, I enjoyed reading in Portuguese. I'm going to be rereading this series at some point again, and I really don't know if I'm going to be rereading them in Portuguese or English. That's probably going to depend on my mood. And also, I listened along to the audiobook, and the audiobook is so good. It's narrated by Stephen Fry, and I just love Stephen Fry so much, so it was definitely a very good experience and a great way to finish the series, although I am still mad about one thing that happens at the end of this book, but aren't we all, right? Right. Okay, that's it. Those were all the books that I read in January. I am very proud of my reading this month. Unfortunately, February is not going that well, but we're still halfway through. I can power up. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't. I'm gonna be leaving all of my links down below so you can check them out, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!